and bring both of the companies in to give a presentation about their proposal and let us ask additional questions about each of their proposals to make sure we have a full understanding of what they base their proposal on, and give us all an opportunity to kind of make sure we have our information square before we make any decisions to go forward. So it sounds like it'll be December 2nd. Great.
Great, and I owe you information in preparation for that meeting, such as what is our current diversion rates and how would that be impacted with this program. And I am working on that right now, so I'll get that to you before that meeting.
Great, thank you very much. And then before we move on, I just want to make an announcement. I did get one resignation from the PCDC. Dave Neufeld is resigning. He's got some additional responsibilities he's taken on, and unfortunately has to resign his position. So that'll give us an opening on the PCDC. So I would love to try to fill that before the Summit Housing proposal comes in, just to avoid having an even number of commissioners at the time when they hear a proposal. So if anyone knows anyone, please spread the word that we have an opening, and if the town could please put that in the news blast, newsletters, things like that, that would be great. We generally get interest when we advertise, so hopefully we'll get someone to step forward. All right, I think that's it. Thank you again for being here tonight. Okay, next on the agenda is audience business. This is the portion. Nobody signed up? Okay, well, we're going to do it anyway. This is the portion of the meeting when the audience is welcome to approach the board on items that are not on tonight's agenda as a public hearing. And we do have 2 public hearings for resolutions related to our 2020 annual town budget. So if you're here to speak to those resolutions, please hold your comments until we get to the public hearings. Otherwise, you may approach the board on any other topic. Each person will have 4 minutes. Give your name and address for the record. You don't, it's okay. You can just, nobody signed up, so if you're here and want to speak, you're welcome to do it. Yes. Oh, you did have one. I'm sorry. Okay. Actually, Mr. Smith did sign up, so he can go first, and then we'll open it up to anyone else after that.
It's Tad Smith, 59 Taft Hill Road in Fort Collins. And I was coming to speak about ordinance number 1071 tonight that's on the consent agenda. I understand it's going to be pulled from the consent agenda, and I don't have standing to join the conversation later, so I figured I'd use a few minutes here just to talk about contribute to some of the issues that I expect to come up that have been discussed in the past. Before just turning to these issues, just for background, the reason this ordinance is in front of the board is because the original ordinance allowing tiny house ADUs only allows them on R1 lots. And because it requires a tiny house to be tied down to withstand 120 mile/per-hour winds, they can't be put in the floodplain at all. Now, there's very few level R1 lots outside of the floodplain with enough land to host a tiny house. So the result is that there's only a handful of spots in town that can even think about having a tiny house in their property, which is why 10 months after the original ordinance was passed, there still hasn't been a single application to put a tiny house within Lyons. And I would expect a year from now, if nothing has changed with the ordinance, that will not change as well. In terms of the issues that I think that are going to come up, I think there's kind of 3 main issues that have been discussed in the past. It's water rights, utilities connection fees, and property taxes. Just to tackle the water rights issue first, what's being proposed here is the same that applies to all ADUs in town. No ADU looking for a permit in the town of Lyons is required to buy a water share, and the math doesn't justify it anyway. The USGS estimates that domestic water use in Colorado averages 123 gallons per person per day, and multiplying that by average occupancy in 365 days a year means that a typical house in Colorado uses less than 50% of a CBT share of 228,000 gallons per year. And according to CSU, about half the water that is used by the house is used to water the lawn. So looking at an ADU sits on the same lawn, so there's no need for any water to irrigate the lawn. And an ADU is typically smaller, so it has smaller occupancy. So what results is that an ADU on average uses less than a quarter of a CBT share. So for a house that's already paid for a water share and using less than half of that water share on average, to add an ADU that uses less than a quarter of a water share and be asked to buy an additional water share for that ADU when their original water share hasn't even been fully utilized doesn't make any logical sense just based on the numbers. As far as the utilities connection fees, just the same way, what's being proposed here doesn't, is the same as applies to all ADUs in the town of Lyons. No ADU in the town of Lyons is required to pay utility connection fees for new construction. Now, the difference here is that R2 zone lots are allowed to have a second dwelling unit, and that second dwelling unit, if constructed, does have to pay utilities connection fees as well as buy a water share. And what's being proposed here doesn't change that. Just to give a little bit of an anecdote behind that, the owners of a R2A property that I'm talking to in town about putting my tiny house on there actually want to construct a second primary dwelling unit and pay the water connection fees and buy the water share for that unit. They don't have the savings to do that. And so in the meantime, if I'm able to put my tiny house on their property, they'll be able to save the money to construct that new building, to buy the water share, and to pay the $21,000 of utilities connection fees to the town, all of which would not be possible if they weren't able to make any money by renting out that space in the meantime to a tiny house on wheels. Now, just as the third issue, kind of property taxes, I think there's a big misconception about this. Property taxes for a tiny house on wheels are effectively the same as a regular house, and I'll explain why. So in Lyons, last year, property taxes were 115 mils. If you multiply that by the 7.2% average state assessment rate, or required state assessment rate, the effective tax rate on a house in Lyons is 0.82%. Now, a tiny house on wheels is considered a Class D vehicle with the Department of Transportation and is subject to an 85% assessment rate on the value of that vehicle. Over the first 10 years, that 85% assessment rate results in an effective tax rate of 0.75% on that vehicle, or tiny house in this case. So whether it's 0.82% or 0.75% in the case of a tiny house, it's effectively the same tax rate on that property. So a tiny house ADU would not skirt paying property taxes in Lyons, and its economic contribution would be effectively the same to the town through property taxes. So I'm about out of time, but if the board sees fit, I'd be happy to answer any questions during the discussion later. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. All right, anyone else like to speak during audience business?
I would.
Come on up.
Do you guys have any way of...
You have to come up, sorry.
Is there any way to do a visual on from a computer?
I don't think we do.
For the 4 minutes?
Yeah.
Turn it towards them. So
Okay, well...
You could send us a picture afterward or something like that
Okay.
if you want to.
Well, I
Can
was
you give your
here-
name and address for the record, please?
I'm Charlie Paris. I live up in Raymond, 2201 Riverside, downtown Raymond. So I was in here 10 days ago getting a ticket reduced for over on Evans Street, going through a stop sign without completely stopping. And it was a day that the traffic was backed up all the way to the Shamrock on a Sunday, with the traffic that you guys are well aware of. And anyway, while I was here, I asked Officer Chris if he would walk outside with me and take a look at a proposal I have for changing the how traffic is routed through the city. And I guess you might, even with sitting out here, it was even difficult for me to explain sort of what I was looking at. But I've got.
They're pretty familiar with the area.
yeah, we have.
Okay.
So I would say give it a shot, they'll probably understand.
So the what I'm proposing is, if I can show you guys this, is this gets completely blocked off. Okay. So we are coming from Main Street out into, this is going towards Raymond, and I do this 7 days a week, so I'm very well, this is really dangerous to begin with. But my proposal is, if you route people down where this truck is coming from, which comes from Highway 7 now, is going this direction, close this off, bring the traffic. So essentially what you would open up is a double lane coming through Lyons going up North 36. You would have a right that would be a feeder, which would have about 5 cars coming down to the stoplight. And then at that point, you would have double lane traffic coming from Estes Park, double lane traffic going up through Main. The car would stop here at the stoplight, and then when it was time for them to go through to Highway 7, the light would change, they would cut across, go to Highway 7. Now, the loss that you get here is traffic coming down Highway 7 towards Lyons would only be able to do a right turn. Now, when I come down in the morning, I'd say 1 out of 20 cars goes up to North 36. So they're all going to Longmont or to Boulder. So they would have to jog across to what I believe is 4th Street, make a left turn at the light, go up to Main Street, so they could continue up North 36. Or if you wanted to go to the Stone Cup or something, you would, instead of going straight through this intersection, that would be the trade-off. And I just, I don't see traffic getting any lighter in Lyons, and I've been here 22 years. And I just felt like it was time to, this is sort of outside the box, and I'm not attached to it, but I just thought it was kind of a creative solution to traffic that's getting kind of ridiculous in the summertime. And did you guys understand the proposal?
Your comment is timely, so we appreciate it.
Okay, good. So anyway, I'm not attached. I just thought it would be worth bringing up, and Officer Chris thought it was reasonable for me to come in and just, propose it to you guys. So.
How'd it go with your ticket? I was curious.
Down to 2 points. First one after 15 years. So.
See, we are in the lower neighborhoods. He's proof right here.
I'm sorry, but our residents would be hopeful we wouldn't go easy on you. So. It's all right. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Anyone else for audience business? Okay, thank you all very much. We have 2 public hearings on the agenda, so I'll let the clerk please introduce the first resolution.
This will be a public hearing for Resolution 2019-120, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, summarizing revenues and expenditures for each fund and adopting a budget for the Town of Lyons, Colorado for the calendar year of 2020.
Okay, is there a presentation?
There's not a presentation, but can we do a discussion?
Sure.
How's that? Well, we started our budget journey quite a while ago, and so today I'm here to request that you guys approve our 2020 budget. So our original budget was proposed back in September 26th. It was delivered to the board. We did do 3 budget workshops throughout the month of October, and we had some really great discussions between management and the board. This discussion resulted in several changes to the original proposed budget. There are some items to note in the 2020 budget. First of all, the total 2020 budgeted expenditures for the town is going to be $13,749,411. Capital projects account for $5.9 million, or 43% of the total expenditures. 92% of the capital expenditures in 2020 are related to flood recovery. The 2020 budget includes a $200,000 restriction on fund balance. $100,000 of that will come from the general fund, and another $100,000 will come from the Parks and Recreation Fund as a set aside for potential clawbacks for the flood recovery projects. The total operating expenditures for the town are $7 million, including transfers out. This excludes the capital outlay and the debt service. And personnel accounts for 30.52% of the total operating cost. So by budget law, we are required to have expenditures not exceed our revenues and our reserves. So revenues plus reserves, the expenditures cannot exceed that. So all of our funds have a fund balance and reserve in excess of 3 months of budgeted expenditures. And we only have 3 funds which are using any kind of reserves. The electric fund had a project for 2019, which actually got pushed into 2020. So when we didn't use those monies in 2019, they actually drop into reserves that we can use for the next year. So the Conservation Trust Fund, we've been building for quite some time. So we are going to use a little bit of that in 2020 to do some of our parks capital projects. And then we did have one additional thing we needed to do with the ponds in 2020 in the Parks and Recreation Fund, and we were able to fund most of that out of the revenues, with the exception of $3,000. So we have a little bit of a reserve that we're going to use out of that. So any funds that we do not expend throughout the year will drop back into the reserves that we can go ahead and reappropriate for the following year. With that, I would like to request that you guys approve our 2020 budget.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions from the trustees? Trustee Browning?
Just a request, at the end of this year, 2019, would it be possible to give us a, particularly on the general fund, a total of items that were either the revenues exceeded budget or the expenses we didn't spend everything that was budgeted, so that we could know what the actual year-end reserve adjustment was. So, and the reason I ask that is we've talked several times, and there's $200,000 built in here, $100,000 from the general fund and $100,000 from the parks fund as a future clawback reserve. Mm-hmm. And should we end up with excess unspent funds in 2019, or maybe our tax revenues are slightly higher in the last few months than we budgeted for, I'd like for us to take a look at that early next year as to whether we could add that additional amount, if any, to the clawback reserve.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? All right, if none, we will go ahead and open the public hearing on resolution, sorry, close my notes.
120.
Thank you. 2019-120. We thought you were all here for the budget. All right, so no takers, we'll go close the public comment. Any other, actually, let's entertain a motion first, and then we can see if there are any final comments. Is there a motion?
I move for passage of resolution 2019-120.
Is there a second? Any further discussion?
Yes.
Trustee Browning?
I would like to offer an amendment to the pending motion, and it would be to remove from the budget the item of $27,000 for the aerators for the ponds. And if that gets a second, I will discuss why I'm in favor of that.
I'll second that.
This was kind of a late addition to the budget, an add-on item after the initial proposal, and I understand why it's desirable. But it's kind of bothered me ever since I saw it proposed for additions. I'm glad we've got the ponds. I'm glad that we're working to try to deal with the algae problem there, but it just bothered me that an aspect of our town, I guess it's considered part of the park system because the money's coming from parks, that to me is not nearly as critical as a lot of other things we need to do, even in the parks, is in there. I regard the ponds as an asset, but essentially a cosmetic improvement that's good to have, but not essential. And I think that this particular item is something we could do without and take our chances at the carp and the aging of the ponds and that type of thing would take care of the algae problem. But I just can't see us spending that money for that purpose when we have greater priorities. That's the basis of my motion.
Staff have any comment or ability to comment on any potential impacts if we don't?
Well, as you know, we had Aqua Sierra came out and did actually we had 3 different groups come out and give us suggestions on how to improve not the water quality, but the environment so that the algae didn't take over. The other projects included mechanical and chemical additives to the water. Aqua Sierra had the most natural means, which were the carp, the minnows, and aeration. And the other, I don't remember the third one we got.
There was actually just 2. We had a biologist and ecologist come out.
So this was, because we were hearing as you guys know, quite a bit of feedback from the public about the visual aspect of the ponds. I would say that it is cosmetic, but it is beyond that if you want to use them for recreation. You know, if you want to be able to have people paddleboard or practice kayak rolls or swim there or whatever, the algae will deter that. But definitely it is something that we don't know that it will balance itself. The water isn't that deep for the type of sunlight we get all summer long. So we're probably always will have an algae issue unless we do something else.
I guess I'm trying to recall, and maybe Trustee Karavis has more, but we had a discussion at the Parks and Rec Commission, and I don't recall any specific discussion around these methods, but I know that there was significant concern expressed that we had some toxic algae present in the ponds.
Well, they were fearful there was. The biologist said there was not.
There. Okay, because I think that they were concerned that
But it can be introduced, and then you do have a problem, yeah.
Trustee Karavis.
I see where Trustee Browning is coming from, because as we do these flood recovery projects, and we keep selling it, it's grant money, it's grant money, it's grant money. But we keep buying this grant money additional, I guess taxes is the right word, but dollars that are needed for our general fund to continue, errors, makes it, perfect example is in your report, Tracy, which was great, thank you, by the way, of the ponds, and we have to redo landscaping already, so that's out of our pockets. There's stuff on consent agenda, Apple Valley, there's grants, we removed a water line, there's things we didn't know about, we find out afterwards, we're gonna pay $45,000 out of our pocket of town lines people's money. We've been doing this since I've been on the board, and I'm assuming the board before me, there was definitely in the thick of things with flood recovery. We did it. At some point, aeration, do we know, this is $27,000, I'm assuming it's just to put the aeration in and turn the switch on, right? As far as we know at this point?
It doesn't include, what the electricity to run the aerators will be.
It doesn't.
Does not.
Does not, of course.
That's the equipment and the installation. But we have electrical.
We didn't have a full staff this summer with Dave Cosgrove, with everything going on in town. You miss cleaning the pump, it's going to shut down, it's going to clog up, it's going to burn the motor. We have expenses. So we have maintenance expense that's on top of this $27,000. Now we're assuming we're going to go in a couple of $2-3 grand a year, possibly depending on what happens. And then I asked the question to those of you that lived in Lyons before the flood, how the previous ponds stay clear for all those years? I don't know. Is there an answer? Are these shallower than those other ones?
No.
Did we put them back the same way as we're supposed to?
Well, they're in the same footprint. The depth of these in the middle is deeper, actually. That's 11 and 12 feet. But they fill in over time. Not fill in.
I understand that.
But I would say they're similar. There were sections that were more wetlandish, but that's what this upper pond would be. This would not aerate the upper pond. It would just be the lower pond. I personally think the public wants those ponds to serve both purposes, recreational as well as functional.
I agree with you. We also just had a report from the SFC that there are towns in this country that passed legislation to go 100% renewable and bought in and realized the hundreds of millions of dollars that it cost the taxpayers to do it, and they said, the hell with this, out, screw it. As Trustee Roberts brought up, it's Rob and Peter paid Paul, then Paul, Peter. Just kind of one of those things. I didn't think of this until he brought it up, started talking about it. It's like, well, yeah, what previous ponds didn't need to be aerated. $27,000 may not sound like a lot of money to some people, but once flood recovery done, what I've learned from the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, and what this town operated on, and from you, and Deb, before the flood, and also $27,000 of keeping Main Street clean for our businesses, keeping sewers clean for our businesses to have tax. It becomes a big deal. So I see where we're coming from, and and looking at some of our negative balances that could possibly come up as we work through this budget in these next couple of years. You know? I mean, $27,000 is your new heating unit for your building here. Or part of. So that's just my 2 cents. Actually 4 cents.
Were you next, or did you already, are you just?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's what I-
Trustee Farr.
I've heard that there are concerns on the ponds from the standpoint that perhaps the way it was constructed, that there's not enough water flow that's coming in, and so that could be kind of creating a part of the problem. However, I just want to raise the point that from a recreational standpoint, those ponds were extremely valuable prior to the flood. I saw people out there in them all the time all summer long. And so I just want to make sure that that's something that's not forgotten as we make this decision, that people have really looked forward to having those ponds come back, but especially from a recreation standpoint.
Mayor Person.
Just a comment or a question first. What type of aeration is it? Fountain?
Or is it the bubbler?
Bubbler.
I think it's a bubbler. It's a bubbler. It's a line that will run the length of the long pond with bubblers along the way.
Okay. I was gonna
It's not
say,
a fountain. Yeah.
Where I lived previously, it was in a golf course community, and we had a lot of lakes. They all had
Aeration.
aeration.
Always, yeah.
But we also had, that was, I think, the 4th biggest item in our budget was the maintenance. Because you have to keep it clean proactively. You can't wait until it burns up. Yeah. What I was thinking though is I'm wondering about the urgency. Is it something that that it's best to do proactively, or could you do it at a later time after evaluation of the progress of changes?
Well, I felt like when I spoke with the biologist that he felt it could be done. Is it down? I don't know. He felt it could be done at a later, that it wasn't immediate from my interpretation. And there is a report.
I thought we had passed that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if
But
that's
we
been
can get it to-
provided, but yeah, they had a series of, recommendations, but that was my recollection, but, I haven't looked at that report for a little bit, but.
It's my understanding that the two items together was the ideal situation to clear the ponds. So we might be able to wait a year to do that. I guess my perspective of the $27,000 compared to what's being spent on ball fields and other things is a very minor amount compared, for the amount of both pleasure, aesthetically, recreationally, and for, people than other recreational amenities we have. I don't, if it's $2,000 a year to fix it, I don't know that that's the case, but for me, that's a pretty small amount for the amenity it brings forward. Just from what I hear from people, we got a lot of concerns over it regularly.
Well, my thought was that we could make it a contingency.
For next year?
Contingency that, if you have funds remaining, at a certain time. And it appears that the ponds are
Clearing.
not doing as well as
Oh,
they,
not doing as well.
as they would with it, then will be reconsidered.
Then I think what you might have to do is like a sweep of the pond, because they talked about that too. You could manually go out in a boat and rip out all of that algae, as a fresh start. That's another option. I think if you chose to wait and the algae worsened, you would have to probably do that before the installation of aerators.
Yeah, so is the town going to buy a boat?
I know, then it'll be a different expense, right? Two little rowboats.
50 Mercury motors.
No motorized vehicles on that
All right.
ponds. Kayakers can go.
I guess where I come down is that I'd prefer to leave it in so that the town has the option to do this if needed. I would hate for us to take it out and lose a year of recreation based on it, or have to resort to other things like chemicals and things like that to get it under control. I mean, we had experts come in and tell us this was their recommendation to get this under control and to do it in the most natural means possible. And I do think it's not like we can take this money and use it in the general fund. I mean, it's in the parks budget. The budget, I think, has reserves sufficient to fund this. And I agree. I think this is an important amenity. I think the neighbors have waited so patiently in terms of the recovery process. They're the last to get done almost, compared to ball fields finally last. But, I'd like to get these to be usable amenities for the community. And, we could leave it in the budget so the staff have the tool if they need it. I'm okay if we wait and see how things go. But if we take it out, we've removed that tool versus leave it in and maybe they won't spend it. Maybe you won't have to. So that would be my preference, Mayor Pro Tem.
Is there any consideration of using conservation trust funds, which can't be used for things like highways and streets and so forth?
It's just straight parks. It's just straight parks at this point, but we could certainly use conservation trust money. It would qualify for that.
It's just a consideration.
That would lower, our conservation trust is, what would the balance be if we did do that? Do you have that handy? May I see what we're spending, but I'm not sure if I have the balance.
Yeah, I think it is worth considering too. The ponds are really, all generations, all types can use them and enjoy them. Compared to what we spent on skate parks and ball fields and things that are pretty niche.
I think I found it.
So the projected fund balance with just what we have currently coming out of Conservation Trust at the end of 2020 would be 168. Mm-hmm. So we certainly do have enough to take out the 27,000 if you'd like to do that.
Okay. Trustee Browning?
Although I know it's possible to do that from the Conservation Trust Fund, I think we're going to need the Conservation Trust Fund balance in future years to be as large as we can. We still don't know how we're going to pay for the lights on a ball field, which a lot of people use. And I'd rather see it, if it's going to be funded, I prefer that it come out of the budget, but if it's going to remain in there, I think the existing source of funds is preferable from my standpoint than the Conservation Trust Fund. I think we need to save that for future larger projects.
All right, we've heard, I think, good discussion, so I'm going to call for the vote on the amendment. So the amendment is to remove the $27,000 for the aerators for the pond. So I'll call for the vote. So the motion fails 2-5, so it will remain in the budget. Are there any other amendments or discussion? Trustee Browning?
Discussion, I'm going to keep brief. I started to write out a little, what I hoped was a mini speech about some big picture budget issues that don't really relate to, for the most part, particular budget items in this 2020 budget. And it got too long, and I didn't want to take up a lot of time on a night we've got other things to do. So instead, I ended up putting it down on paper. And the general gist of it is, if you look at the most recent study of the Town of Lyons long-term fiscal health, it was the 2017 adoption of the Lyons, the LPPA plan. And the experts that did that plan concluded that Lyons at some point is going to be in a fiscal deficit if we do not find ways to raise new revenues. The more and more I think about it, I think in reality we're probably at that fiscal deficit now, in that we have a lot of very critical items that we don't know how to pay for. We don't know how to fix and pay for the wastewater treatment plant problems. We've got leaking sewer pipes and water lines all over town that we know need to be fixed. We don't know how to pay for them. We've got streets we needed to repair. We don't know how to pay for them. We don't have any kind of a sinking fund or capital improvements fund for streets. And so I think the prediction in that report is correct, and we are looking at both an existing and a long-term fiscal deficit, and that we need to take some very serious steps back and big picture views of how we address that. The idea in the 2010 comp plan was that we'd develop the Eastern Corridor, generate a lot of sales tax, and that would help us a lot in the long run. I don't know if that's going to prove to be feasible or not, because retail sales everywhere, not just in Lyons, are suffering brick and mortar retail. So I was thinking, how do we address this? And when you go year by year, budget by budget, even particularly item by item in a budget, I think you lose focus there. So I put down some thoughts on paper on some rethinking of some major things in the budget that I think would be prudent for us to do. Because of open meetings laws, I can't circulate that among the other trustees and the staff outside of a meeting. So I put it down on paper, and I'm going to hand out copies here that make good bedtime reading if the trustees need them. And I've got extra copies and have e-copies if anybody else in the town cares to read about my views on budget things, and I may at some point make them publicly available in some form. But I just wanted to say that I think we've got, in future years as this goes on, we really need to take a step back and look at some of the things that we like to have in the budget, and that some people might consider essential and others not. We need to really decide what's essential to retain, and we may need to get rid of some things that have been sacred cows for a while. And a section of this does exactly focus on beware of add-ons, particularly those following the flood grants. We get the grant, then what do we have to keep paying for to keep things that the grant paid for going? So that's as much as I want, much time as I want to take, but I did want to get this in the record sort of for future reference.
I appreciate the consideration of open meeting laws. So.
I guess that what I would say to that is Lyons is unfortunately not very different from most every other community in Colorado. If you talk to other mayors or county commissioners, we're all struggling with the same thing. There's just not enough money in tax revenues that are coming in to pay for the infrastructure improvements that every community needs. And it's every community. It's different. For us, it's wastewater and roads and stormwater drainage, and other communities, it's other things. But it's actually those same things for a lot of communities. We're all struggling with those big dollar items. And I would actually say the town has done a lot of the right things. I think our economy has come back incredibly well from a federal disaster that was unprecedented. What I would look to is the state to get rid of Tabor. Quite honestly, if we really want to fix this problem, we have to get rid of an antiquated law that was put through by a very small number of people who just have very, stringent beliefs in government. And I respect everybody's differences in terms of what the government's role is and how big it should be. But at the end of the day, our role and our job is to provide these necessary resources to the community so that we can all have a very high quality of life and have safe drinking water and not flood and do all the things that we need to do to provide people with basic, utilities and infrastructure. And I think what has held Colorado back, I would argue, is not necessarily just Lyons, is the fact that we can't raise the taxes in any simple way. And so I think, my response to that is I hope the voters will pass, that initiative CC and allow Colorado at least keep any overages that are generated and not have to refund those, which comes back to be a handful of dollars to the average citizen, but could be really meaningful to our schools and transportation. While I think we should all never lose sight of the fact that there are things we can do locally. I think some of these issues are, bigger than we are and, are making it more challenging for us locally than it necessarily needs to be. So I appreciate your taking the time to put the thoughts together. And I think it's always worth reading, because I think sometimes it's helpful to do that big picture view of, are we going in the right direction? Are we missing things? So I think there's always value in that. So I do appreciate you taking the time, and I will read it. And I hope I think we should make sure it's available to the public so that they can read it as well. However you want to make that at least part of the public record, I would say, as part of our discussion tonight. part of the minutes. There you go. We should do that. So, Trustee Browning?
Anyone that would like to email my town email address, I'll be glad to send you an electronic version, or come by the house and I'll give you a paper copy.
I'm sure you, Laverne will be sending you an email shortly.
I'm going to personally deliver one to Laverne.
Hey, Miss Laverne, we miss you if you're out there watching. All right, I will call for the vote on Resolution 2019-120, please. All right, and the motion carries, and I want to thank our Director of Finance for the great job on the budget this year. You're halfway there, so please continue.
Yeah, I thought the budget notes were extremely helpful.
The summary was excellent. All right, next item for public hearing.
So the next thing will be a public hearing, 2019-121, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado appropriating sums of money to the various funds on the amount and for the purpose as set forth below for the Town of Lyons 2020 budget year.
Okay. Discussion, presentation.
So this is the second half, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, once the budget is set, the governing body then needs to appropriate the funds. So what this resolution will do is it will set the legal limit of money that the town is allowed to spend from each fund. If unanticipated revenues are received or if expenditures are required to go over what you guys are appropriating at this time, then we would request a supplemental budget and would present it to the board for your consideration. So this resolution sets the appropriation equal to the budgeted expenditures. The expenditures are categorized by capital, operating, debt service, and transfers. Did you have any questions?
Are there any questions? Hearing none, we will open the public hearing. Don't all rush the dice at once. Anyone like to speak to the resolution on appropriations? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion, please?
I move for approval of Resolution 2019-121.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion or amendments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All right, and the motion carries 7-0. Thank you. And do you want to give just explain the ordinance for the mill levy, since we haven't done that by ordinance in the past?
So the ordinance for the mill levy. I did not come prepared with that one.
That's okay. I think just to say we're doing it by ordinance versus resolution.
Yes, in the past, we have been doing the mill levy, setting it through a resolution. When we were actually looking for something else within the town code, we noticed that the mill levy is actually supposed to be set by ordinance.
So we're giving back all the property taxes?
We are not. We are not.
There's a statute of limitations issue, so you don't get any smart ideas out there.
Okay.
So the first reading will be this evening, and then we will have our public hearing at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Just in case any of the trustees were wondering why that one was different this time. Okay, all right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks to all the staff for the work on the budget. I know that's a team effort, so great job. Nice to have that behind us. All right. Next up is consent agenda, I believe.
Deb?
All right, Deb, take it easy.
They keep getting longer every week. Resolution 2019-122, a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Place Dynamics LLC to prepare a hotel feasibility study for the town of Lyons. Resolution 2019-123, a resolution approving an agreement for animal services between the town of Lyons and the Longmont Humane Society for 2020. Resolution 2019-126, a resolution ratifying a construction agreement with Roberts Excavation for water service connection for the Dean property at 556 Apple Valley Road, Project 19AVWL-04. Resolution 2019-127, a resolution ratifying a construction agreement with Roberts Excavation for water service connection for the McGuckin property at 558 Apple Valley Road, which is project 19 ABW 03. Resolution 2019-128, a resolution of the Town of Lyons ratifying the construction agreement with Roberts Excavation for water service connection at the Welke property at 414, 416, and 418 Apple Valley Road, which is project 19 AV VL 05. Resolution 2019-124, a resolution awarding the construction agreements to CAP Excavating for the 8-inch VCP sanitary sewer line between the manholes on either side of 5th, which is located at 5th and Bloomfield Avenue. Resolution 2019-125, a resolution awarding the construction agreements to CAP Excavating for the installation of a manhole at the intersection of 2nd and Kelling Drive, where the sanitary sewer lines from each street connect. Be the first reading for Ordinance 1068, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons amending Article 4 of Chapter 13 of the Lyons Municipal Code for the purpose of increasing the service rates for wastewater utility service. First reading for Ordinance 1069, which would be amending Article 4 of Chapter 13 of the Lyons Municipal Code for the purpose of increasing service rates for the water utility services. First reading for Ordinance 1070, an ordinance levying general property taxes for the 2020 budget year. Resolution 2019-129, a resolution approving a lease of town-owned property with Telluride Bluegrass Festival for the 2020 Rocky Mountain Folks Festival. Resolution 2019-130, a resolution approving a lease of town-owned property with Telluride Bluegrass for the 2020 Rocky Grass Festival. First reading for 1071 for an ordinance amending certain sections of Chapter 16 of the Lyons Municipal Code regarding tiny homes as accessory dwelling units in R2 and R2A zone districts and the November 2019 accounts payable.
All right, would anyone like to pull any items from consent? I'm almost afraid to ask. All right, Trustee Farrell.
I would like to pull item 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
All right, others, Trustee Caravas.
She stole my thunder. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 13, please.
Others, Trustee Brown.
Item 1, the hotel study, and then items 11 and 12, the Rocky Grass. Leases.
Every item. Which ones was it again, Mark?
1, 11, and 12.
So basically the survivors are 2, 8, 9, and 10.
No.
And 14. Yeah, 14, sorry. Oh, sorry. All right, I spoke too soon.
Do get counted.
8, please.
I'm sorry?
8, please.
Number 8. All right, so scratch that. Wow.
Sorry you had to read all those.
We're less than 25% for the consent agenda tonight. All right, Mayor Pro Tem, want to add to that?
No, I'd like to move for approval of items 2, 9, 10, and 14 on the consent agenda.
All
I'll
right.
second that.
Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote. And the
9, 10, and 14.
2, 9, 10, and 14 passed. That must be a new record for us. All right. With that, we essentially do not have a general business item yet because we need to have a second executive session before we can do that. So we will move straight to the items pulled from consent. And I was not able to keep track, so we're just going to go through the list. So we'll start with number 1. I think that was you, Trustee Browning.
It was. I just had a couple of questions. This is the hotel study that I look back in the budget, we had 16,000 budgeted for in the 2019 budget for this, and that's what we're spending. But it's going to cost 20,000. And I wanted to first ask, is this grant funded or is this general revenue?
This is general fund from economic development.
Okay. So So there's no grants that supported this?
Correct.
Okay, because it was part of kind of like a package item and had something else in it that was grant funded, I couldn't tell. So is the other 4,000 funded in the 2020 budget, or are we just not spending it now?
I think it is based on what you voted on about 5 minutes ago.
Except
But I
that
wasn't,
we want to clarify this further. We broke it purposely into 5 different areas, and we selected the ones that are most prevalent to the town to know. We potentially have a developer who's willing to finance the others. And so if they are, great. If not, we do have a little bit in 2020 to pick up those other 2 items if needed.
So a developer might be willing to pay for the other 2
Yes.
deliverables, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
We've had that discussion with one of the developers.
Okay.
If he
That was-
feels that after the basic information, he needs more.
That was kind of my next question. I think I remember being told at one point that Mr. Tamburello was looking into hotel possibilities on the south side of that property. And I don't, as far as I know, he didn't do a formal written study, but he did kind of an informal survey of
Well, that's
whether
why,
it was...
based on the information we get from those first 3 items, if that's enough for him to feel comfortable, if not, he has expressed he may be willing to finance the rest of them.
Okay. All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
sure.
Yeah, I was actually gonna pull this item as well. I felt like, you know, I didn't totally understand which pieces weren't getting done or not, but I felt like we had more cushion in this budget this year than we did in 2020.
So-
Potentially, and so I was actually gonna see if you felt like there was enough funding this year to make sure we can complete them. I think if the developer's willing to pick up some of that cost, that's great. So that was just my question, is if you had a preference for which year it hit.
It's the timing.
Yeah, I think it is. It's timing. It's if we go into contract with them, you know, if you approve this tonight, then they could start working on it. We do know, same thing, we have a week in holidays in November and then probably 2 weeks in December. And so trying to get as much as they could get done before the end of the year. And then us looking at it staffing wise and budgetarily, if we can get any other components done in 2019, or now that the 2020 budget is moving forward, we have that room in that. If Mr. Tamburello says what you've done is enough, I don't need there's also a piece in there, the optimal site selection, and we don't know that that's really necessary since we pretty much know the sites. And with the aspen leaf being purchased, we let that firm know that we were doing this, and they were very interested in it because I think it will help them inform what they want to do on that property.
So will it look at all of the sites that have been discussed? It's not going to just look at the eastern corridor?
Correct. It'll look at
all 3.
Yeah.
4 sites. There's 4 sites we've identified.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if we didn't do a portion of it, because sometimes then you come back and it ends up costing you more later in the long run, and I'd rather just, I mean, it's $4,000. It seems like something we should be able to absorb.
We've had 3 developers interested, so that would be Riverbend, Main Street, Eastern Corridor, and then we have Aspen Leaf. So there's really not, everything, south of town is all floodplain, north of town is not zoned such, so we really feel that is something we don't need a developer or a consultant to tell us, since they're all within a mile of each other or 2, which is most optimal.
The only thing I would say to that, though, is that I don't know how far they would go to look at economic impacts of that location. So, you know, obviously, a hotel that's walkable to downtown may do more for, and that could be important for the Lura at some point. And so,
I'm sorry.
I didn't know if that was the part of the piece that wasn't getting funded or not.
It was the optimal site. I'd have to look at the notes. I know the optimal site selection, and then there was one other piece in that PDF where the first.
Okay, well, it sounds like it might get funded either way by the developer potentially, but if it doesn't get funded in 2019, you feel pretty confident you can do it in 2020. Okay, I think that's really the bottom line. Is just I would rather I didn't want to see us not do it, I guess is my point, and then pay late, regret it later. Okay, so is there a motion for resolution 2019? 122. I can't keep track of everything tonight, sorry. Is there a motion?
I'll move for approval of Resolution 2019-122.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. Okay, it passes 6-1. Thank you. Trustee Browning. Okay, so number 3. Trustee Farrell, did you get that first? Okay. Go ahead. Can you turn your mic on?
Oh. Okay, so it's on page 134. So basically, to me, I know we're supposed to do these one at a time, but 3, 4, and 5 are so similar, as they are, Robert's Excavation working with 3 different properties on Apple Valley Road. So what my curiosity was is that we really didn't specify in here how is this going to be paid for? So I guess I'd like to know better about what the funding source is being pursued. And if it doesn't come forward, what's Plan B? And can we really approve something that we don't have a specific funding source for?
So currently it will be funded by the town under the water fund.
Water, okay.
Yeah. And we are pursuing, we have a CDPHE grant that I believe we will have some additional funds left on the grant. So I emailed them this week to see if this is potentially something they could cover under that grant that we currently have for flood recovery. But right now, that's our only other option to get these funds covered. Otherwise, it does become a town expense. And that's where it's planned right now, is under town.
Okay, so can we, then from a legal standpoint, can we approve this without, or should we say specifically the water fund? Does that matter?
It doesn't matter from a legal standpoint that I say specifically which fund it comes from.
Okay. All right. Well, I just kind of really wanted to clarify how we were going to pay for it and get that information. So I'm willing to, I don't want to hold up the construction of these properties by any means, but I just really wanted to know.
Yeah, and Trustee Farrell, of course, whenever there's grant funding, we try to put that in the resolutions to specify it as grant funded. But
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem. You were first and then Trustee.
I actually just had a couple of questions. Were these properties previous customers?
Yes.
So we're restoring.
Yeah, we're just replacing what they already have.
So at one point in time, they paid a fee.
No, well, they didn't because they gave the town an easement to take the water line through their property at that point. So you have to remember the water line in Apple Valley used to be under the river, or near the river. So all of their service connections came from the north, the river, to their house. We've just replaced the whole water line to the front with not their input. So now we have to run the service line from the road to their house. We totally have to obey.
So we no longer have the easement.
The easement still is there, actually. We have that in writing. But we don't need a new easement for this line.
Right. What I'm trying to get at is sort of the, equity. I guess if they were previous customers.
They were previous customers.
That puts them in a different category.
Yes.
And something we'll be I guess we'll talk about it at a different time, related to Upper Fifth.
No, they were previous customers, and each of them had a different number of taps allocated to their properties based on agreements that are recorded on their deeds.
So has anybody calculated payback based on base fees?
No, because it's really not an option that they don't have water. This is one of those critical, they will not have water because we moved the water line.
Yeah, no, I understand. Still, just trying to understand, in effect, does it ever sort of pay for itself? Not that there's an option. My back of the envelope says about 10 years. For
Well, they
3
pay-
properties paying out of
They
town.
pay a higher rate out of town for their
Base
water rate,
fees.
Tim.
Right.
Yep.
Well, if you include not only their base, well, that's true. They pay a double their water usage fee, which could be considered.
So that would need to be probably less than 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there is enough in the remaining CDPHE grant to cover the total expense if the state approves it. Yeah.
Trustee Karas?
Ms. Farrell had asked one of my main questions was the fund, just make sure that we know the funding source of people in town lines. You see this, that it comes out of the water fund, since it's water infrastructure. The other reason I asked for it to be pulled, or was going to, is on 2 of the driveways, 2019-127 and 2019-128, we're installing a line under a driveway. I just want to make sure we have protection, Brandon, that once we put the line in, because it's under a driveway, there's a lot of vibration, that's where in town, cities, things break because of vibration over years. Once we install it, our contractor's warranty is up. We have no, it's somewhere in writing somewhere that we are protected. We don't have to replace it if it breaks 3 years from now because they're moving heavy equipment across there for something they're doing on their property. I don't want someone to come back to us and say we have to replace that. I just want protection is all I'm asking for in those 2.
Yeah, I'm looking for the code reference, but we don't pay for service lines, and that's part of the code.
Okay, so we are protected. So we're just doing this one time deal, as Victoria said, because we took their other line and moved it elsewhere.
That it becomes their responsibility upon
Correct.
acceptance.
Okay, that's what I was looking
And I think it's in section 13.3.100 potentially. Yeah, we don't pay for service line repair maintenance.
I just want to make sure they don't try to come back. That you guys, as long as you've got that, and it's protected in the code, perfect. That's whether it's the contractor or the code guy, is good. That's what I'm looking for.
Is there a motion on resolution 2019-126? Oh, sorry.
How many homes on Apple Valley are connected to town water total, you know?
A lot.
I was just looking at that list. It's probably at least 20.
Debbie, we're looking at recently.
I know, and I can't remember.
I was just
It's
looking.
quite a few.
20 or
to
so.
30?
Okay, are there any others besides these 3 that might potentially have to have their service lines reconstructed, just these 3?
Yes.
And just out of curiosity, since we have elsewhere, or I guess we had first reading consideration of water rate increases because Longmont increased our water rates. When we increase water usage rates for in-town customers, do the increases in rates for Apple Valley customers, are they double what the increases are for in-town customers? Because if you only increase everybody's rates the same amount, they're not paying double anymore.
Oh, no, it's written into the code that it's, their usage rate is double of ours.
Okay, so whatever we raise everybody else's usage rate, theirs will raise
Double.
twice? Okay, I didn't know how that worked.
Do you
Okay,
have the code out?
Yeah, and I confirmed it's 13.3.100G is the obligation to maintain lateral service lines from the main to the building or structure.
How
So
about you have the rates handy too?
I can only do so much, but I'll look for the rates.
I just want to, I knew they paid double the rate, but if we raise everybody's rate $1, including theirs, then they won't be paying double anymore, mathematically.
Oh, no,
Right, so
theirs will
if
do the
everybody
same.
else goes up $1, theirs will go up too.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, is there a motion on the resolution?
I'd like to make an amendment.
Okay. We need a motion first, and then we can.
Okay, so,
Is this, which one?
This is 126.
Okay.
correct.
You want it for all 3 or just
We
one?
can't.
We can, you do one at a time.
Okay, so I move to approve Resolution 2019-126.
For a second.
I'll second.
Okay. And if you want to make an amendment, you can do that.
I just like having our i's dot and t's crossed, so I would like to amend that we add a whereas, that the source of funding will be coming from the water fund.
If not
However,
funded.
the attorney recommends wording that as well.
I would just add This project is funded through the town water fund unless grant funding becomes available.
That works for me.
Is there a second for the amendment?
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And that passes 7-0. Any further discussion or amendments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote on the motion to approve. All right, and the motion carries. Thank you. Do we need to have the same process for the next two? All right.
Yep, no, I would just do the same thing, so.
Okay, good. So on resolution 2019-127, I move to approve resolution 2019-127.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And is there an amendment? Just leave your mics on for
Okay.
foreseeable future.
So the exact same thing, I would like that we have a whereas stating that the funds will be coming from the source is the water fund, and that if we get some grant monies, that will help pay for it.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion on the amendment?
I do have one clarification on the code now that I had time to go look for it.
Okay.
It's 13.3.100, or excuse me, 13.3.80. I just had it. A3, and it's outside of the actual rate schedule, which is in part 1. It says any rates outside of town limits are double, as the town administrator has said. Shall be $47.65. So maybe
When we adopt the
when we talk to we'll get the water rates, we'll get to that. But there is a provision for outside of town limits.
But my amendment stands at this point.
Did we get a second on the amendment?
Yeah, second.
Okay, if there's no further discussion on the amendment, we'll vote on the amendment. And the amendment carries 7-0. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote on the motion. All right, and the motion carries 7-0 as well. Last one, 124.
I move to approve resolution 2019-128.
I'll second.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, 128. I'm looking at the window below it. Thank you. You got the second. An amendment?
And I'd like to propose a whereas identifying the source coming from the water fund and, you know, if there's grant money, et cetera.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion on the amendment? Call for the vote. And it carries 7-0. And we'll vote on the overall motion.
Thanks, Tracy.
And it carries 7-0 as well. So those three are approved. All right. So item number 6.
That's me again. I'm
That's you.
6, 7, and 8. I think somebody else had something in there.
Okay, go ahead.
And it's basically the exact same thing. I just really want to make sure that we are stating where the funds are coming from because it's not listed, and perhaps maybe in the future we could be sure to list the sources.
In the resolution.
So,
Or even
So-
cover sheet too.
Right, in the cover sheet.
I know like the Roberts ones, it was in the cover sheet that said it was coming from town funds, but we can make sure that's
But I wanted to know if
in the resolution.
general or water.
When the specific fund it's coming from.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
so for item number 6, is there a motion to approve and then you can amend?
I move to approve resolution 2019-124.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and amendment?
So again, I'd like to make an amendment as to where is the funding in the whereas.
These are both sanitation fund.
Okay.
And they're in the budget for sewer line maintenance, I believe.
Okay. Any discussion? Wait, did we get a second yet on the amendment?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. And it passes 7-0. Any discussion on the overall motion?
I have something.
Trustee Garvis.
I believe on the background information, the first part, the 5th Avenue in Broomfield, at one time we discussed that's possibly or is going to help alleviate the problems on Upper 5th that we've had.
It hopefully will help.
Hopefully will help. I like to add a whereas, if staff and Brandon don't mind, kind of indicating that, like around the 3rd whereas, make a new 3rd whereas. The scope is indicating to help alleviate or is the beginning of the process of the town of Lyons, since so much discussion went back and forth with the residents in the town. Just that it's in the resolution that we are taking care of it, working on it already. That way, if something happens up there, as someone's individual line, and a house is sold, and they've heard things in the past, just to alleviate tax, it'll just be easier for the town, for town staff to say, yeah, we've already started, it's being worked on.
This is
Just kind of a COA for our town staff in the future as well.
to improve.
I briefly jotted down this 3rd whereas as the project scope, as mentioned in the cover sheet background information, comma, is intended to help alleviate sewer concerns outlined of this project now and into the future, semicolon, and then go on to the next one. Whereas that plain basic enough to get through what I wanted.
I wouldn't reference the cover sheet, but I think other than that, the rest of it would be fine.
I will
Yep.
accept that. Consider that's what I said.
No worries.
Any motion?
That's my motion.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Voting on the amendment. It passes 7-0. Any further discussion on the motion?
I'd like to make an amendment.
Trustee Farrell?
I'd like to amend the 3rd whereas the town to include the word, the town has obtained funding for the funding for the project from sanitation funds.
Didn't we already do this?
I thought we did.
Did we actually pass that?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Then I move
We're
to
good.
approve.
Okay, we're at that
Sorry.
overall motion. That's okay. We've got 2 amendments that have passed, so we're voting on the motion. On the
As
overall
amended.
motion as amended. Okay, call for the vote. Good. There's a little deja vu going on.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
Oh
Okay,
my.
so the next one is number 7. I'm not sure who's got
That was me.
Okay.
So I move to approve resolution 2019-125.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'd like to amend resolution with I believe it's the 3rd paragraph as well. Whereas, I'm just making sure. To state, whereas the town has obtained funding for the project from the sanitation funds.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. The amendment carries 7-0. Any further discussion on the motion or further amendments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All right, and resolution 2018-125 passes 7-0.
I'm done.
Yay, good job.
But maybe if we could just, yes, in the future, always include that, that'd be great.
That's good feedback. Yeah, thank you.
So number 8 was pulled. I just wanted to remind the board that we can't discuss ordinances on first reading. So all we can do is decide if we want to move it forward to the second reading and public hearing. So I don't know who pulled number 8.
Kayla?
Okay,
Yes.
go.
I believe we haven't really discussed rate increase much. We just addressed this during budget workshop. And so if we can't discuss this, you can censor or stop me when I say go past what. I think that we need to have a discussion about perhaps hear from staff or the UEB or both about the effectiveness of our BOD surcharge that was instituted a year ago, the same time we made the previous wastewater rate increase. So I think we should think we should be able to hear a report and analyze and determine whether it's doing what we need it to do. If it's, for example, paying all the costs associated with treating high-strength wastewater and not just the cost of running the plant a couple extra days. And I think we also have to look at I think we should look at the same time an ordinance to address not having adequate diversion or pre-treatment policy. Our attorney has told me that he has significant concerns about what we have. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe you said that if we don't do something, the state will do it for us.
EPA.
Or the EPA. And so...
I don't know that we can do that as part of this discussion.
We can't do it as part of this discussion, but it's noted that we'd like to see a pre-treatment update.
So, I don't...
And I think that the guidance on you'd like to see this information on the BOD as part of the public hearing, we can certainly do that.
Yeah. So if you want to request certain items to be presented as part of that discussion, we can do that.
Happy to do that, yep.
Mm-hmm. So then, my suggestion that perhaps we would address policies of pre-treatment and perhaps readdressing the BOD surcharge at the same time. I can't request that, or we can't. I mean, how would one go about making that happen?
I make a request for an agenda item potentially, but would require a separate ordinance with two readings.
So we could then perhaps request a table until such a time as...
The problem is that we budgeted an increase, that if we don't move it forward and have it in place by the first of the year, we won't achieve the budget.
So we have
that
some
we set.
time.
Not really.
Three more meetings.
But see,
But
it goes, your first reading, second reading, there was 30 days,
Right.
so there really isn't.
And, if we delay, I think my advice is that we should just move it forward to the second reading, and we can always continue if we feel like we need to continue that public hearing. So that if we feel like we don't have enough information to pass it at the second hearing and actually when we can have the discussion, we can always continue the public hearing for additional discussion or more information.
And we could continue a request for agenda items at the end of the meeting. At
You
the
can make
trustee.
those anytime.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the vote here is whether they can make it move forward to a public hearing. If you don't like it in its first instance, then you can vote it down and it dies for lack of being proceeded to a public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But state law requires two readings on ordinances, so it's part of the process.
But typically, we would have a discussion in background in a workshop or some other session prior to the first reading.
Well, I thought we did that as part of the budget.
We did.
We did only for the rate increase, right? But we didn't have any background discussion about. It was a budget workshop. It wasn't a wastewater rate increase discussion.
Try to see if we can put it in a workshop before our next meeting.
I mean, we can always, if we move it to the public hearing, I think what happens is we can at least do the noticing and meet the notice requirements, and then if we need to continue it, we can always continue the public hearing. So it doesn't necessarily mean we have to make a decision at the next meeting.
That's
I
correct.
understand. Thank you.
Yeah, so, it's up to the board, whatever you want to do, but we can't discuss it tonight because we have to do
Yeah,
that. at the
I
next-
understand. Thank you.
So is there a motion for ordinance 1068?
Mayor Salling, Trustee Browning.
Sorry, Trustee Browning.
I'll move that we approve the ordinance 1068
On first reading.
on first reading.
Yeah.
No, second.
Is there further discussions?
Add something to the discussion, and I would echo what Trustee Roberts said, that I think we need to have a discussion at an appropriate time about not only the surcharge, but a pretreatment ordinance, because as I recall, the advice we got from JVA was that in order for us to get permitted with CDPHE, we were going to have to look at a pretreatment ordinance.
I'm going to ask we don't discuss the
Okay.
pretreatment at this time.
I'm
because
not-
it's
I'm not discussing it. I'm just saying, I
But
think-
we're trying to talk about a different topic.
I think it's relevant to consider at the same time that we consider this on second reading, and I'm in favor of passing it to second reading, but I'm saying, I'm basically saying I think the staff needs to prepare to address the status of pretreatment ordinance at that time.
Okay, I think I kind of understand what you're saying, but I think
We can give an
have to-
update on the effectiveness of the
I think
BOD
we should have
surcharge
another
existing.
agenda item at the next meeting on that topic. We can't, we didn't notice any of that tonight, that would be part of this discussion. So we can certainly add that to the next agenda to have a conversation about a separate ordinance for pretreatment. So we have a motion and a second on the table for moving this to second reading. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Can everybody try to vote and then let me know when you're done? Thanks. Okay, it passes 7-0. Okay, the next one is number 11. I don't remember who pulled this. Oh, these are Planet Bluegrass, okay.
Line that's on the Planet Bluegrass leases.
If they want questions.
Was there specific questions?
Yeah, that's a
Resolutions.
The question I was going to ask was, why hadn't we received the required annual report on taxes collected from Planet Bluegrass? But that question got answered during the day today, after it had been asked several times during the year, so we now have that information. A couple of other questions. We're proposing a 20% increase in the leases, right? But the total revenue, I believe, would go down slightly from last year, is that
No,
right?
it goes up. The reason in your budget notes, I think it went down, so last year it was 3,000 per day, this year it's
3,600. In the first budget workshop, I want to say it was on October 1st, we talked about, or we had submitted an amount of $4,000 per day, but in discussions with the BOT at the workshop and based on the fact that we changed or lowered the parking to $8 instead of $10, it was kind of a reach to then turn around and knowing we get about 3,500 and change per day from the parks to then ask for 4,000. So it's a reduction in the expected revenue from the first budget, but it's more revenue than in 2019.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, I see. Let's see. I have a comment on the overall situation, but I'll save that for comments after a motion is made. The other question is, are we deciding to stick with the Planet Bluegrass's formulation of 6 people per campsite for purposes of determining the lodging tax? Is that being decided at the time of these leases?
I believe so, based on what they have proposed to the board in the past year and what they submitted. Jill's not here, but that formula came up because we, as town, when we have an RV site or a tent site, we allow 6 people per site.
Yes, I looked at that today on the camping regulations for Johnson Park, and it does say that. It says $6 people maximum per campsite, but it seems to me that what we should be seeking from the Planet Bluegrass campsite determination is not the maximum number of people per campsite, but the average of camping passes they sell or people that are at the campsite. So I think the use of the maximum possible number of people at a campsite is not the proper usage. I think we should be trying to figure out what their average site is, and if their average number of people per site is, and if that requires going through the campgrounds during the time of the festival and trying to make a best estimate of what that is, I think that would be productive for town staff to do. Is that something we can do? I mean, one of the campgrounds is our own, so we have access to it. Would we have access to Planet Bluegrass's campgrounds to send people through and see? Do we really think there's 6 people per campsite? Because I've spent a lot of time at those campgrounds over the years, and I can think of trailers with 1 or 2 people in them, we'll make tents with 4 people per family in them, and, there's probably some that are 7 or 8 as well, but I'm not sure that we should be going for maximum instead of average.
I think that the challenge is that we sell camping per person, not per site. So there is not a feasible way to go through and get that calculation. As you said, there's sites where there's 7, 8, if not more people in a single tent. So I would be tempted to look at that 6 as a reasonable average for the way our camping works. It's a very kind of a family style. Everybody's close and tight together.
But aren't there also sites where there's 1 or 2 people?
Well, but for every one of those, there's a site where there's 6 to 8.
So the average would be, 4 to 5. And I'm just saying, I would like to ask staff to look into whether we should automatically accept a maximum number for regular camping at our campground as being the proper number for determining how many people should be estimated for campsite purposes at festival grounds.
Is this part of the lease?
That's
No,
what I asked.
and actually, I'm looking to the attorney because I had written and asked if there was anything we could put in there, and I think, Brandon, if you want to talk about what you felt like from what we could and couldn't do in the lease agreement regarding the lodging fee.
I mean, we can't set the lodging tax in the lease. It does set the maximum number of campers in the lease, which has an effect on that, but it doesn't set the lodging tax, which we can't do. And so it only indirectly affects it through the maximum number of campers permitted, which is 800.
I would ask that we actually discuss as a site, this is kind of out of the scope of the lease. And so if we want to have a different discussion about how to approach the lodging tax, I suggest we have a separate agenda item for that.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
And I think that's what Attorney Dittman had recommended as well, that not to put it in the lease.
And that's fine. Okay, that's my questions.
Are there any other questions about the lease? Trustee Roberts?
I believe that we discussed a couple of times the need to have a workshop with Planet Bluegrass before we move forward with approving leases. Am I remembering correctly from? And,
We did that. We did it last year.
This year.
We did it in 2019.
We did it in 2019. Yeah.
Okay, well.
No?
We discussed at the time of the payments for the access to, for staging grounds for the water line, that we needed to have a sit-down discussion on a number of things with the Planet Bluegrass people, and we were going to do that in the form of a workshop. I think that's what Trustee Roberts is referring to, and that hasn't occurred. And I would say lodging tax would be one thing to talk about at that workshop.
I believe
Okay,
Trustee
I don't remember
Drysdale
that.
also made a
I
request.
made that request in August. It's on,
Oh, okay.
I think it's on the action items.
So we have a good
Okay,
bit of time,
sorry.
do we not, yet to table this until we have an opportunity? I mean, this is early in the season even.
We go
yet.
out to sell tickets in.
Early December, first week of December.
Can you just refresh my memory? I don't remember what the workshop,
It was to
what's the
just-
context for
There was a
that?
whole list of issues that we've had over time with Planet Bluegrass, including both leases and lodging tax and sales tax, and then was it decided to have a workshop to discuss all of those things?
Yeah, it was, we had that request that came in, we had to make a decision that day.
About the transportation and the parking.
And, there was an access fee that was, I don't
The
think
bridge.
was,
The bridge and the easements.
Okay, I remember now, sorry. I'm remembering like a year ago when we said we had to
Yes.
sit down. And
Yeah.
we did sit down with them and go through their tax numbers, and I think it might have been lodging tax related at that time too, so.
Sure, and I think Brian Eister was here for that.
Was, yes, okay. So I guess it comes down to how the board wants to move forward. I mean, if we don't want to approve their leases until we have an opportunity to sit down, I don't know what the workshop schedule looks like for the next couple of weeks.
We have a couple of items that have just recently come up for November 18th and December 2nd, but if they don't need the entire workshop time, we probably can get in one of those days. Do you remember, Jeff, 18th? The 18th is... This one, something, Kim, you brought forward today, the 18th. December 2nd is pay as you throw, interviews.
That will need the entire time
Yeah,
for it.
and November 18th was, we just set that today.
I can't remember either.
2 minutes.
There's so much.
The pay as you throw doesn't have a deadline. It seems perhaps you could postpone that to the spring or something.
I didn't write it down.
4th Avenue pedestrian bridge for the 18th, that's what I had.
Oh, right.
We want to update you on the funding for the 4th Avenue Ped Bridge, so maybe we could do it in conjunction with that. That could also, can that wait?
I would hate to
Yeah.
delay the.
Well, we could also do it in a memo form. It's an update of the new opinion of cost and
Okay.
the town's share of that and how we will fund that,
Can that be a general business item instead?
potentially.
Yeah, it could.
So I think that may have a lot of public interest.
So we probably could do November 18th if that's not too short of notice for you,
I think that'll
if we
work.
give you a list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask for clarification? So the list we're going to give to the Planet tomorrow of items for the
board
8th?
would like to discuss with them on the 18th.
Okay, and then are we moving the leases to the 18th?
We would continue the leases if they,
Okay.
presumably.
I was going to move to approve the leases.
Okay.
Yeah, I
And
think
still
that-
continue to have the
Okay.
discussion.
Yeah, I think the discussion actually is broader than the leases.
Sure.
I don't know that, I don't think we want to use the leases as leverage or anything on this. I think what we're really looking for is enhancing the relationship between the town and Planet. So we have, communications that occur on a timely basis, so we don't end up with things like last minute, have to do this or that, that we're understanding each other to have a really good open line of communication. I think that's the objective.
And I think, I honestly never can remember about the sales tax reporting, if we're supposed to request it or the Planet is just supposed to give it. And then when I did reach out, and I think Zach can probably explain, but with, their staffing, and I don't know if you've all met Zach Tucker, but he's the person we work with now. And so that helped too. When I reached out to Brian was like, no, definitely, work with Zach on all of this.
And we've had a couple of personnel changes this year, as you can see, so we've been kind of trying to put the pieces back together as quick as we can, so I apologize for missing the deadline on that report, and hopefully we won't let it happen again.
All right, thanks. So we can move, sounds like we want to move forward with leases. I would suggest, though, that we get staff any agenda items that you want to discuss, so we can get those to Planet
Yes,
Bluegrass, so they can be
tomorrow.
prepared for the discussion, so that it can be productive. So, I don't know if we need an entire workshop, if it's more just to convey that we want to work more productively with them, so.
So tomorrow, everybody's going to get their
Submit a
stuff
list
tomorrow.
tonight or tomorrow to me and we'll put it together.
Okay, is there a motion for the first resolution?
I will move to approve resolution 2019-129 relating to the Rocky Mountain Folks Festival lease.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? Trustee
I
Carey?
just have a further question. I don't know if I can ask you now or before we do this. Just on the tax document, the tax due, is that to the state or is that town of Lyons portion?
To us.
That, I believe, is the,
I think it's a full, the gross.
I think it's the full amount, yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
Yep.
So Lyons portion of 18,190 is, ours is what, 7 point? No less than half. Yeah. That's all. Thank you. That was easy.
Vote. Any further discussion?
Are we, that relates to the bit of discussion I was going to offer, actually. We're sure that those figures of well, I'm not going to put the figures in the record. I'm not going to do that. The figures that were provided are for the total taxes collected, so that's town of Lyons, county, it's the whole amount.
Yes.
So we'd have to multiply by the town's portion of that to get the amount of tax collected for the town of Lyons.
Correct.
Okay, all right, understand.
Okay, call for the vote on the motion. All right, and the motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Motion for resolution 2019-130.
I pull that for the same reason. They're really related, and I see no reason to await the further discussions to approve these leases. So I move the approval of Resolution 2019-130 relating to the lease for the Rocky Grass Festival.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Okay, 7-0, thank you. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here, guys. The last one is number 13. This is also an ordinance. Forget who pulled it. Okay, Trustee Garrett.
First reading.
I pulled this ordinance because as the board we discussed, and it's even mentioned in here, in the information about the ordinance, that there is a condominiumization issue that we've talked about, and we in the past have passed ordinances to get to a quick objective, then realize something sneaks in before we clean up some stuff. The staff is left with a 1 or 2 off hybrid that's going to sit on the books on a property for possible eternity or until the house is changed or something. And I don't see a rush on this, so I would like to see us, based on the summary of alternatives is number 2 that was provided by staff or Brandon or everybody, just pull the ordinance at this time to a later date. And it says we discussed in the first reading, so that's what I was kind of indicating to do. That way, instead of bringing it up in the second reading, staff doesn't have to go through all the hassle, putting the next agenda, putting everything out there, going through all this. And if enough people agree with me that we want to hold off on this till we finish the other issue that could possibly change something that we talked about. I can't remember all our discussion, condominiumization, but it's an issue that's going around, and I would like to see more information on that before we go forward with this issue. And it's not that big of a push at this time, I don't think.
Can we get clarification from staff it doesn't really elaborate at all what issues might mean with condominiumization? Why that was in there?
There were some people that identified the fact that a property could be condominiumized and it could break apart the ADU from the main structure. Our code has an ownership requirement, which I'm not sure how that affects condominiumization. I think the risk is low with regard to this. This code, it still only allows 10 tiny homes on wheels to be developed. And the PCDC has decided to bring up the issue of condominiumization. We're addressing it we talked about it at the last meeting. We're addressing it at the next meeting. Brandon is going to come and give us an update on how we can exert some control by adding code to the Lyons Municipal Code.
How does it relate to this, though, is my question. I didn't quite...
It's only that because of the ADU issue.
But it's not anything to do with tiny homes?
No.
Okay. Other questions or comments on this one?
I have a couple of statements or perhaps questions, but I wasn't clear if Trustee Carabas has made a motion or...
Well, we have to decide if we're just going to move it forward, so we can't talk about the substance of the ordinance, but we can decide whether we want to move it forward or not.
Okay, so he was perhaps proposing to
not
table.
move it forward.
He's saying not move it forward to wait for the condominiumization. I think it's
so we're...
Yeah.
Are you or are you not making that motion, Trustee Carabas?
This time I was just getting a feel for where you're all standing.
Okay. I wanted to bring up that at the meeting where we were presented with a proposal for tiny homes on our medium density zone lots, that there was, I think, some inadvertently presented incorrect information about whether a property owner has the right ability to construct a conventional ADU, a stick-built home. It's an accessory house on an R2 or R2A lot, and it be considered by our current statutes an ADU and thus be exempt for the requirements of purchasing separate utility connections and dedicating a water share. And so I believe that Administrator Simonson and our PCDC chair, Edding, indicated that that was possible. And Planner Glasgow has since told me that that's not the case, and also made it fairly clear in the documentation that we received for this first reading. And so would you like to present to the whole board what we believe is concise and correct?
Yes, the ADU ordinance currently does not allow ADUs in R2 or R2A. It would have to be a modification that is proposed in this ordinance. The number is 1071. So that would allow tiny homes on wheels as an ADU in R2 and R2A.
What about the tap thing?
It would exempt the taps.
I think we're starting to get into the substance of the ordinance here. We can't have this discussion tonight. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, this is a decision on whether or not to move to a public hearing or not. And I think the clarification has been made that that you can't have an ADU in R2, R2A except for this ordinance, but
that's correct.
And so if you were to vote to move this forward, we have a public hearing on whether to allow tiny homes in R2 or R2A. That's about as far as we can go.
So,
well, I could propose that we table this until we have an opportunity to correct the background that we had in our presentation.
I think we just did.
We can't have a discussion.
He's talking water taps.
Water taps?
He's saying we give
hang on.
information about the water taps.
So I think the information comes out in the public hearing process. That's the appropriate place to have the discussion and to get the information out. If there's an error or something in the memo, we can ask staff to correct a memo or something like that. But if it's just an understanding, then that will be part of the presentation at the public hearing.
I can update the cover letter to make it clear as well.
And that's fine, and that will be posted in the packet at the same date as the packet.
If this moves forward.
If it moves forward, yes. Trustee Miller, I'm sorry.
Could I also just ask a question about process?
Yep.
If a trustee such as myself wanted to propose an amendment, is that something that the attorney can assist in?
I can help you develop language. It would be appropriate to bring up during the second reading.
So it's
but yeah,
not
I'd be
like
happy
I want
to
to propose an amendment and I hear, no, you can't. Can't do that.
I do that all the time. Be happy to help you craft an amendment if you'd like.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you. So.
Okay, sorry, Trustee Miller.
I tend to agree with my Trustee Caravas as far as pulling this ordinance and re-looking at it completely, because the ordinance that we're trying to pass here is not even feasible with the ordinance, the ADU ordinance, there's a complete and total mistake really that's happened in the ADU ordinance from the very get-go and the tiny home ordinance from the standpoint of what can be on properties zone, what can be, what is allowed on the different zones, which is what Trustee Roberts was getting at and how they were tapped into. So I think we need to relook at both of them together, side by side, and and then, try and fashion them somehow together in some way. Because right now, it's kind of a mess. Just saying. I would vote no tonight on passing this and forward. Just saying.
I guess I'm not clear what the mistake is. The memo looks clear to me. It looks accurate to me.
I think what is being said, there was a mistake that was made in the previous workshop as to where, in the presentation, as to where ADUs were permitted. And the code clearly states that ADUs are allowed in R1, E, and EC, and A residential districts. And a statement to the contrary was made during the workshop.
Okay, but the information in our packet tonight is
correct. Is correct. Yeah, and this would add tiny home on wheels ADUs, just tiny home on wheel ADUs, to the R2 and R2A districts.
Right. So I guess, I feel like we can have this discussion, but we have to move it forward to have the discussion.
Right, to really get the
So
substance.
My feeling is the PCDC did make a recommendation to move this forward. And so I would like to at least move it forward to the public hearing. We had a pretty strong recommendation from the PCDC, in my opinion, to move forward with this. And so I don't necessarily, I also think that there's interest here as well by the public. And so, both a landowner and someone with a tiny home, that they've been very persistent in trying to help us resolve the current ordinance, which really doesn't work. So, we can get to public hearing and see where we land. But I also don't like always tying one ordinance to another, because you never know how long something else is going to take. And it doesn't seem like it has a very direct impact. It has an impact on generally ADUs. So my feeling is I would like to see it move forward to a public hearing. Sure, Trustee Roberts.
It was my impression that the chair of the PCDC did not understand, and he was one of the two who gave us the information that was incorrect. And so it wasn't clear to me that the PCDC made their recommendation in the light of understanding what is and what is not allowed. And further, it wasn't clear to me that the discussion that the board undertook was well informed and was not able to proceed. In my opinion, I wasn't able to proceed with what I wanted to discuss and recommend with the other board members, because it was cut short by being presented with information that was incorrect.
So could we
that's the answer.
move it? We could move and ask the PCDC chair and the PCDC to come back, and they can just simply say whether that would change their opinion, I guess.
I can ask, yes, but I can tell you also that the PCDC did make the recommendation with full knowledge that ADUs were not allowed in R2 and R2A.
They did? Okay.
Yeah.
He was really clear that anyway, the discussion, I think, is, I get that it's not appropriate for this setting. The discussion I'd like to have, and I don't know how to resolve that. We can take it offline.
Okay.
And hopefully we're able to bring the background that I think this board ought to be able to consider to the second reading, if nothing else.
If there's any concern about background information, I'd be happy to work with that offline with staff, and we can make sure we bring it to it in a public hearing if this decides to move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And anytime you want additional background on a potential agenda item, always feel free to reach out to staff and say, I'd like to see this as part of your presentation. That's helpful to us to know what we should be bringing forward.
It's just that it was clear, it seemed clear to me that while I had the information, the rest of the board didn't.
Okay.
And
That's fair.
Is there a motion for ordinance 1071? Sorry.
I move to approve ordinance 1071 on first reading.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. All right, and it passes 5-2, so we'll move forward. I'd like to suggest we take a break, if that's agreeable. Is there a motion to take a short recess?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Have a good night.
We'll do that.
You have a good
Yeah, stretches.
Hey, Mark, is this still going to be discussed tonight?
What's that?
Follow-up from executive session concerning
Because my understanding was that under 16,
We're gonna do that.
community ownership clause, how does that not prevent?
We
believe it does, the other people say it doesn't.
Direction is resolved at the executive session.
Is this because it was
So we
state
do
law?
it, so now we're basically going back to the executive session.
At the end of the meeting?
You can, within your police powers, control the process.
And then I guess if we come out of that and do direction to staff, I don't know if we will or not.
It's not our position.
I'm not sure that is what we're gonna do, what we're gonna do. And so if we don't, it could be not today, or we could recommend do something. We could let you know there's an stick around.
But so
The part when we come back in will be
You
recorded.
said that there's a.
Right, yeah.
Control the process.
If we come back in and do something after the executive
And so
session,
the
I will let you
question is
know
whether or not that has to be a
that
belt
we
and
did
suspenders
something that
approach
could
to
go
make
on.
sure someone doesn't.
But you're not going to do something before the
interpretation of state
The
law.
whole this one is gone.
That's. Yeah, I mean, looking at the code, it doesn't.
There's a larger,
I think that had to be on the agenda, so we
not just ADU, multiple.
Well, sure, in case you, yeah.
whether we will or right, whether or not, that's what I was talking about.
All right, great.
Big picture thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, obviously it applies to all of that.
There's all sorts of, yeah, people have gotten very creative recently in their interpretation of condominiumization. Gotcha. And this is kind of wrapped up in that discussion.
Yeah, there's nothing about very ancillary to that bigger discussion.
There's nothing about kind of.
No, I understand that. You look at the AD policy, that's what I understand. So,
But yeah, people have challenged that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that I believe their interpretation.
But sometimes you gotta take preventative measures, right? All right, appreciate it.
One of the things that we have to talk about at our workshops that you can do is reporting 7 days after the festival is mighty short time, and they want to lengthen that to 30 days or something like that. That's, I don't know about that. I think that was my reason, reasonable time. And I'd rather wait 30 days and make sure we got it. Try to guess 7 days after the festival. That's something we can give them, but I do think that information is important. And there's, I'll wait. There's a point I want to make. Information without being careful not to reveal their actual. That's what but I'll be careful with that, but, no, last year too, so there's no point in getting it if one can't. That's what it says. And actually, it's true. That same 1990 agreement actually imposes a requirement of the town administrator to render a report to the board within 30 days after she gets the information the plan to address. And that's been ignored too. That's what we
Connected that, so I'm really excited to figure out this on the 21st. But yeah, we're gonna go Saturday to Saturday. And I'm hoping that we'll agree. No, yeah, we're gonna be on the ocean, and right now it's okay. But, I mean, the air quality.
write it up, the numbers.
I'm interested.
No, I'm good.
We're right on the water. But,
It's the maximum in traffic.
right.
How much sales tax is collected from lines?
Yes, exactly.
It is big.
We did last year.
Sales tax.
Good night, Susan.
That's prevented grass, grass, traffic grass. And you look at the remaining total for the rest of the businesses and lines, besides that bluegrass, it's lower income.
Probably won't happen.
And then sales taxes goes down. So, now I know we did other benefits. General assumption is, having all this extra day kind of brings in a lot of businesses. It may not. It may. And that may be fine.
Is it kind of woodsy area? Yeah. Has to be lived up there, yeah. Right, right.
Oh, was he?
You have to go through sales. I'll write it, follow that up.
And I'm gonna see that too.
Okay.
You see that? Oh, good. Oh, good, okay. You got an email, you can look for it now.
Yeah, I can turn it off, yeah.
Probably my last switch.
I'm gonna plug in.
What about smart, like, yeah, it's not here.
Okay. Okay, that's fine, yeah, I can do that.
Yep.
No, it's all right. I've done it many times now.
Not the URA.
I mean, we usually get Mojos or Oscar Blues or.
So I'm keeping it at the average of, under the limit.
Okay. The Oscar Blues.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Usually Oscar Blues.
Okay. I kind of thought we were
Just talk about Like from Boulder, a good beer. Oscar Blues.
Okay.
It could be. Still. It just, somebody needs to apply. I think we can apply. The town can apply. The town can apply for the URA.
We're finally getting good to market,
Well, thank you for having us.
Forgot to turn this off, so I just turned it off.
Wow.
So I'll have to start it again as a.
Flip
And spend enough time chatting with your husband, always, he's the most handsome person in town.
He doesn't even have
Pretty funny.
Well, it's just only the two of us.
Very funny, but I have to like try to remember like Mr. Johnson.
Definition.
It doesn't have to be like.
I mean, land use is subject to our police powers. I mean, they could try, but I mean, courts are generally not.
He makes a
When
good,
it comes to general police powers, land use are
Yeah, I have a
Did you
picture.
see that?
position to
I
question
have a picture of my phone.
Oh, okay.
the judgment
Yeah,
of the town government.
Yeah, I wish that I cornered him and jumped around for him.
I didn't get into all that.
Giving us some great stories about
By
that.
having some.
But to get
How to
That somebody built by themselves.
The town could certainly choose to allow.
Oh, I know, but I'm just saying.
which one was that?
I don't know.
They're, you know.
So, yeah, and I had three
Just
people wanted one.
the design,
Everybody was the big one.
tell me the design.
Yeah.
The designs, like I said, have you seen what they do with?
It's really nice.
Manufactured,
really extremely
manufactured homes now? I mean, come on.
That's the way to do it, though. You,
Yeah, I mean, you have to admit and accept the land use
Lots of
code.
drinks
Wow.
and food, and, you know, it's all your friends and you're relaxed.
but then get their money and send them money payment.
And they allow the URA.
It's the second time that Amy and I walked kind of, it's not really far.
It's not.
But we walked this party, and then Brian and done it.
Has it there the same time?
Yeah.
No, but my friend, my client came to me this morning.
Sorry.
Those are twice a day.
Okay, we got through our items. So trustee reports. Trustee Roberts, do you want to start?
have anything to report from my liaison position with the EDC, except that, my light's off, I don't know if
I'm sorry.
Okay, except for that, they have just rescheduled the, let me see, what's this called, Varney, the kickoff meeting for the
Gap, business gap.
that's right. I guess it's the latest buzzy term, right? The business gap study kickoff, and I just got the notice today. I'm happy to see a lot of people were responding to participate also, just so you know. And sorry, I wasn't quite ready to go here. But Tiffany sent an email around scheduling it for, the 14th at 9 a.m. And I'm planning to be there. Okay. I'm not clear where I want to go as far as I mentioned in trying to inappropriately insert a discussion in first reading. But for clarification, I would like for us to be able to allow property owners, our two property owners, to build an ADU and being owner-occupied property, be exempt from the utilities connection fee and water share charge, just like if they were on R1 property, as I believe, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Victoria, if you see, we're in the impression that was already the case when we discussed this a month ago. But reason being, well, there's a number of R2 properties where it's not going to be two rental houses. It's a resident that has a large house on a lot that's their permanent home, and I feel like if there's any place where we would have an ADU, why wouldn't it be in an R2 zone? And why would we create the inequity of requiring this additional expense for those properties and not the R1 properties? And so is it going to work to say, like, I'll propose an amendment? You know, I don't know where
I think
to go from there.
the two options are to work with the attorney on whether that's something that could be included in the ordinance that's coming for us, or does it have to be a separate agenda item? And it probably has to go back to the PCDC for an opinion. Or
yeah, I think if you want to do a larger opening up of the ADU code, which is what this is proposing, it would probably have to go back to the PCDC.
And in addition to that,
as a separate ordinance.
Okay, so I'm so glad that I brought this up now. Then, if you allow me to, if it's okay to proceed, tell me what.
I think we just have to say we need to set an agenda item to discuss whether this is something the board wants to take up. Because the scope of the last ordinance we discussed is fairly narrow. I'm not sure if we could make changes without noticing that separately.
It just seemed like we had the opportunity for that ordinance to go the direction to be able to discuss and propose the amendment or what have you, but it didn't get to go there. And it's maybe this seems like a subtlety, but this is an issue of adding ADUs to R2, R2A properties. Or is it just about adding tiny homes to R2, R2A properties? To me, it's adding ADUs, but it's only adding a particular type of ADU.
Yeah, I think we're just getting too detailed here.
Right.
I guess is the request to add an agenda item to add ADUs in R2 and R2A, or is it a larger look at the ADU ordinance?
If it was possible to propose such an amendment when we take this ordinance up at the next
Let's talk about that offline.
Okay.
Specifically, I can see whether it's close enough and what the case law is on how close it has to be. it may be feasible to at least suggest an
But
amendment.
if it's not, then what?
Then we have a separate ordinance, basically targeted at either amending the ADU code in a more targeted way, in a more expansive way, or a targeted ordinance just for the purposes of adding ADUs to R1 and R2 and R2A.
Then you can appreciate how it feels like to me that probably just won't happen.
Well, I think what we were trying to do also is, we were somewhat trying to avoid reopening the whole ADU ordinance and trying to make it very narrow change if it was a simple change. I think you should talk it to the attorney to find out, is that also another simple change that could be made, or does it require a more thorough?
And I'm not sure. I wasn't prepared to look at
Discuss it
that.
and figure out what maybe the options are. I think then, if we do need to do it, then we just simply put it on the agenda and see if the board agrees that we should move that forward.
To take up yet another ordinance about.
Or review the whole thing.
And it may be feasible to include as part and
It could
potential
be.
amendment. It could be. I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't prepared to address that issue. But if Trustee Roberts wants to send me an email tomorrow or tonight even, reminding me that you'd like to schedule a time to discuss, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, then would we also have the option if someone brings up to say, can we table this tiny home on R2 ordinance until we can modify it, take it back to the PCDC so that it has a chance of it being addressed? I mean, not to seem sort of dubious
I think
about
those
it.
are all options.
These are all-
The
you-
attorney
okay.
can help us.
Yeah,
kinda
you can
figure out
continue
what's
it, you can
wrong.
deny it, and with instructions send back to the
I mean, there have
piece.
been times we have changed the scope, but re-noticed it and continued the public hearing to go out. So there are options here, I think. Probably, we shouldn't debate it.
I mean, yeah, okay. I think if we had taken up the discussion that I would have initiated, I believe that I would have had some, my colleagues on board with some of the thoughts, and perhaps we would be going somewhere with it, and that opportunity just sort of undermined in my mind.
And if we bring that up during second reading, and there's a majority that likes to see this going a different direction, and we think it's beyond the scope of what was originally noticed for, we can always, as Mayor Sullivan just said, re-notice it with a revised scope, and then do it again, essentially. So there's lots of options here. But it's hard to know without being able to get into the substance of what you're requesting, whether or not how far outside the scope of the original.
Okay.
But we can discuss it offline. We can kind of talk about it, and then we can also maybe do some stuff during the second reading to ferret this out. But what exactly we're trying to do.
Okay. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. And I actually have a pretty open week, so you're lucky. So.
All right, Trustee Farrell?
I went to last Friday with Amy Reinholtz to this community conference, and it was about exploring innovative design and policy that encourage diverse, affordable communities, inclusive of the working and single-parent families, immigrants, artists, creative, mobile home parks, small business, students, and others. And I just actually decided to kind of go to this on a whim, and it ended up really being super valuable. And I have not done it yet, but I do plan to kind of sit down and put together sort of a summary of some of the things. Amy actually put one together that was really thorough, so that I can share it with you. But the quick gist is that our workforce is aging out. They call it the silver wave. And that
The silver tsunami.
the silver, yeah, maybe that's what it is actually. And that we don't have enough young people to fill positions, and so and ways for small communities like ours that could potentially have a very large economical impact. And so thinking far down the road, what do we do to fill that gap? And so it was a really interesting eye opener. But that's when talking about, I think Peter Swift was the name I gave you. He spoke, and traffic is affordable housing and traffic are the two largest expenses for people that you need to be your workforce in your community. And so here we are addressing both of those issues. And so it just really brought home a lot of the stuff that we talk about on a whole new level for me. So I'll put something together and send it out via an email of the summary, but I just thought it was super, super incredible. So that's it.
Thanks.
The PCDC had a workshop, and among the considerations was the acquired parcel, Apple Valley parcels. And I would have to say that just about every opinion was present.
Categorize that.
Well, all the way from, let's not do any of them because it would just be an additional expense for the town and may not be the best time for us to be adding expenses on the maintenance side, all the way to there are several recreational opportunities and annexation or other kinds of opportunities that may be presented. And then the third opinion is, well, there may be some parcels that would fall in that category, but not others. So I think that's kind of the range. A couple of PCDC members hadn't seen the properties yet, so they were, I'm not sure if they've arranged to do that yet, but there was a plan. Did they get out there? Okay. So that's going to be an interesting discussion. I think we've heard from some of the other commissions that tend to be interested in including many, if not all, of the parcels, but there are different views as well. Also talked about ADUs and condos extensively. We don't have to talk about that again. And are spending, I think, some good discussion on the heading, under the heading of ramping up for the comp plan. Just thinking ahead, do we want to have a consultant from DOLA who facilitates it? Do we want somebody to write it and then we rewrite it? Experiences that I'm sure Trustee Browning would really like to participate in again.
Sign me up.
That's it.
All right. Trustee Browning?
I don't think the SFC has met since our last meeting. They are meeting in a couple of weeks, but you heard what they've been working on tonight, so I have no further report beyond that.
Trustee Miller?
I'm in the same boat as Trustee Browning. The Housing and Human Services is meeting again on the 12th. So be having a report next time.
Good. Trustee Garvis?
Let's see, College Board, a report of the last meeting, 'cause that's when we met. We won't meet again until the 19th. UEB meets this Wednesday, the 6th. Wastewater analysis will be discussed. Electric transmission analysis for me is in. We'll be discussing that. Working on the RFP for the electric meters. That, the way I'm seeing on the agenda, that has not gone out, correct? They're still working on the RFP, right? The meters, yeah. And it was brought up on the last discussion with those meters. Do we look at acquiring meters that, see if I get this right, like a water can be read the same, or future water meters can be read as easily on the same system with the new electric meters. Basically, electronic system, they'll report data every so many seconds of usage up, down. And at some point, we'll have to go to that in water. So do we try to find something compatible, not compatible, otherwise double the expense later on? So it's becoming a bigger.
These meters have been like the biggest.
Pain in the butt?
Yes.
There you go.
I mean, since literally my first term, we've been talking about doing these meters and we have yet to buy them. Seriously.
Yeah.
They've been on the budget for the last 6-8 years.
And let's see.
Is that now that I say that, because I think some questions have started coming in. About, would there be a preference? It's out.
Would there be a preference if you could serve both water and electric with some meter?
Okay. Let's see, the latest figures are in on usage of electricity. Our peaks have been all over the place. Our September peak was 4 p.m. September.
Weird.
That's September 5th.
When everybody gets home from school? I don't know.
I don't know.
What is this? What was
Electric usage peak. May 9th, back in May, it was 10 p.m. Through the summer, it was basically 7 o'clock. So, however, that puts us, what is it, WAPA? What mean is when it comes to, when it was discussed about alternative energies, and WAPA's peaks are actually an hour and a half to 2 hours below ours. So it means saying it does look better for us if there's, you know, because if our peaks were the same, it's be harder to provide us power from different sources at the same time. Because they have to provide, Mean has to provide us a certain amount of electricity on the lines based off our peaks, so that we don't have a brownout. That's bad. Bad for business, especially with compressors and freezers and refrigerators. Really bad. So there you go.
People plugging in their cars
Yeah.
after work and then.
Yep.
I mean, typical peaks across the industry is about 7 o'clock, so that makes a lot of sense.
In the morning
Yeah.
at 7 and night at 7.
Yeah.
And
It's all these old people tuning into Andy Griffith.
That's right. Judge Judy.
Does anybody have TV anymore?
I have a TV.
We're digressing.
Yes,
Okay.
so they'll be looking at, and just, let's see, some of his information got cut off the way he scanned it on, so I can't tell you if this is electricity or water at this point. So we won't go there, but funds are doing fine, except, of course, wastewater. We're still, if you remember my analysis last time about the gooey scab, it's not quite solid yet.
Gross.
Still there, but there you go. And I've asked multiple times, I'll ask again, general business item to discuss if we want to have an open discussion, the Apple Valley sewer lines and septic systems at some point, make sure the river has to do with, you know, keeping the river clean at one point. So I've asked multiple times, getting close to 10. I know it's big, but to start the discussion, because at some point we open the IGA with Boulder County again, right?
21.
Yeah. So it's just, I would like to see just a discussion, get the feel where people are on bringing them on our sewer line. We need more water going through that sewer system.
We've done a feasibility
I know we
study on
have.
that
I know.
the year before the flood, I think.
Yeah. So I can't discuss, I would still, as I keep saying all year long, I'd like to see that come under the general business to see if we want to discuss it as a main item or not. There you go. All yours.
Get up.
I saw you.
We'll talk offline. So the students had another meeting, and they had a presentation from Brittany Johnson, Brittany from Boulder County. And her kind of whole job is to go around and do education on vaping policies, and she brought some really good information, some things we hadn't considered and didn't really know. And the most important thing was that most communities don't license retailers that sell cigarettes. So you don't have to have a license. It's not like a liquor license. Anybody can sell them. And the what's that?
We're one of the few who don't.
She said most of them don't.
No, Colorado does.
Right. Okay, so Colorado is like one of the few states you don't have to be licensed. And so one of the things that Boulder County is actually looking at is doing the licensing at the county level so that it wouldn't be a barrier, so that if we wanted to put in stricter regulations around what they can sell and who they can sell to, they would create that licensing piece. So there's a meeting coming up the end of this month, third week of the month, somewhere in there. And they invited the students to come down to that meeting and participate if they can. But there's going to be discussion with all the municipalities in Boulder County to see if that's something we want the county to pursue. It does sound like we would probably have to put a licensing process in place. If they don't do it at the county level, we'd have to do it locally in order to be able to regulate purchases more so. But it was really useful information. She did a nice job. And they had some good discussion. They didn't make any final decisions yet. I can't remember how we segued into environmental issues, but somehow we ended up there. They're really interested in coming to the SFC and learning a little more about what they're doing, so you may see some students pop in. But they're really ready to like tell the town to get its act together when it comes to environmental issues, I think, and passing some resolutions around that. So we'll see what happens with it. So that was kind of their meeting. And then Parks and Rec meets on the 11th, but it sounds like that's Veterans Day, so they may push their meeting to the 12th. I haven't heard if that's confirmed yet or not. But that's all I had. If anybody's watching and you haven't voted, vote.
So I sat in on that student commission. It was awesome. Those kids are
Really
awesome.
good.
They really are. They come from such a great place.
Mhm.
And they're sharp as a tack and very interested in doing things the right way,
Mhm.
getting everything down, motions, seconds.
It's a fun meeting. I would encourage you to come sometime if you're interested. Oh, yeah. I will say, they were a little nervous because there were some other spectators. The last couple meetings, it was just me and them, and they were pretty relaxed. But with Victoria was also there. I think they started out a little nervous, and then once they got going, they were fine. But yeah, they're really, really doing a great job, and they're a lot of fun. So they're ready to go on TV. They've said they want us to broadcast. I know. So one of these days, we'll bring Kim and have her turn on the cameras and let people know they can tune in if they want. Maybe when they're ready to make their decision on the vaping policies. All right. That's all I have. So action items.
Okay, I'm gonna add an item, I gotta start at the top, I'm sorry, it's just. Okay. Reach out to Peter Swift, gauge his interest in helping us. We will be developing talking points and communication plan regarding outreach to CDOT about their PEL and access management plan, including reaching out to the executive director. And those issues regarding CDOT. And then we have, there were 3 or 4 considerations for the Sustainable Futures Action Plan. I'll follow up with Garrett to make sure they add or not add in. Postmaster or Trustee Browning's budget comments as part of the packet. Recognize Don Sandoval. An amendment to the whereas clauses for about 4 or 5 different resolutions. Scheduling a workshop with Planet Bluegrass, hopefully on November 18th. Paul clarifying in the packet prior to the second reading, and Trustee Roberts talking with the attorney regarding R2s, and then adding an item of gauging interest on Apple Valley sanitation to the next agenda.
Just a question on that. We have already done some work for what created the easement or what had, what's the extent of our preparation for that?
Which one?
Extending sewer up to the Apple Valley.
We had an opinion of cost drafted up of what it would take to put in, and divided that by the property owners, and it was.
I mean, there was some project, wasn't there, for a stub up to that direction through the Riverbend area?
Yeah, it's there.
Oh, for sanitation?
Yeah.
No,
Part of our construction of the park is a stub. There's an 8-inch stub.
I think we're going offline here, so I think we can schedule a discussion if there's interest.
It's also discussed in the LPPA.
We just thought it would be worth researching that till we get the,
Yeah, and then there was,
So one step at a time, we'll bring it up. Okay.
Except I really have no clue how to fund $3 million project like that. It'd be like ice sanitation. Those were what I had. Deb, you have anything more?
I think I had one that, update the flood map on the town website.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and then post an opening on planning commission.
Thank you. Okay, all right. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
I move to go back into executive session.
Yeah.
I move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS Section 24-64024B for the purpose of receiving legal advice from attorneys representing the town regarding the MOA with Lions Properties and the town's legal complaint against Lions Properties in Boulder County Court.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Sorry.
Any further discussion? We'll call for the votes. Trustee Farrell, can you?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so we passed it 6-0 with one